Welcome to this deep dive. We're exploring ideas that, well, might just shift how you see yourself and the world.
hmm
Today, we're digging into how new experiences, particularly travel, can sometimes surprisingly unlock a deeper self-awareness.
It's a really fascinating area.
We want to unpack some of the psychological principles at play here. Why does just stepping outside your usual routine, your familiar surroundings, sometimes lead to these really profound personal insights?
It touches on something fundamental, I think. This tension we all feel between needing stability, wanting our world to be predictable.
Right, that comfort zone.
Exactly. And yet, there's this drive for growth, for change, which almost always requires shaking up that very stability.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
It is. Think of it maybe like a still lake. It's calm, predictable, beautiful even.
Okay.
But it's the stone thrown in, that disruption that creates the ripples. That's what changes the lake's surface, even if just subtly afterwards.
I like that image. The still lake. We build these lives, these routines that become the background, the ground against which everything else happens.
We do. It's efficient.
Yeah.
Our brains actually strive for that. It's a Gestalt principle called pregnance. We look for the simplest, most stable interpretation.
So we naturally filter things out to keep it simple. Like, I know someone, Anna, a lawyer. Her commute through Central Park every day. Totally automatic.
Precisely. For her, that park was just ground, familiar, unchanging backdrop. Her focus, the figure, was probably already on her first meeting, her emails.
Yeah, the workday ahead.
But then, one day, a street closure. She had to take a completely different path through the park.
Ah, the stone in the lake moment.
Exactly. And suddenly that familiar ground wasn't ground anymore. It jumped out. It became the figure.
So what did she notice?
Things she'd walked past 100 times but never seen. A hidden Japanese garden, apparently. A group of amateur astronomers setting up telescopes for, I don't know, observing something specific that morning.
Wow. Stuff that was always there, but her perception just screened it out.
Until the pattern was broken.
Yeah.
Her brain's novelty detection system kicked in.
Mm-hmm.
You get this little jolt of neural activity. The parts of the brain linked to learning and adapting light up.
It's like your internal GPS suddenly shouting, recalculating.
Sort of, yeah. Our brains are constantly mapping our environment, predicting what comes next. A detour forces an update, a redrawing of that map.
And that effort, that creation of new pathways, that's where the potential for growth lies, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's research on environmental enrichment showing that exposure to novel, complex environments can lead to real, lasting changes in brain structure. It boosts cognitive flexibility, even emotional resilience.
So it's not just seeing different things, it's that the act of processing the unfamiliar actually changes us.
Yes, because perception isn't passive. It's not like a camera just recording. It's an active process of organizing sensory input, making meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Change the input, change the environment, and you inevitably change how we organize and perceive.
That makes total sense. Like when you go back to your hometown after being away,
Oh, definitely.
suddenly you see the architecture, the little details you were completely blind to living there. The familiar feels new because you've changed your frame of reference.
That shifted frame is key. And it's not just about places. It applies to our mental landscapes, too. New contexts challenge our assumptions, our frameworks.
Like perceptual constancy, how we tend to see objects or even people as stable.
Right. But travel can disrupt that. You might see a different version of yourself emerge. You know, the person who's usually quiet at work suddenly becomes incredibly outgoing navigating a foreign market.
So the context reveals a different potential self.
Exactly. And the physical act of moving through space seems important too. There's a sense that being in motion encourages a kind of future-oriented thinking.
While being still allows for more introspection.
Perhaps. Travel offers this dynamic dance between the two, looking outward at the new, which then prompts reflection inward.
It's like changing your vantage point alters what comes into focus. Like an artist shifting position to get a different perspective on their subject.
A great analogy. The anthropologist Gregory Bateson talked about double description. Understanding something more deeply by seeing it from at least two different viewpoints. Travel forces that on us.
And you learn about the place, but also about your own assumptions by seeing them reflected or challenged.
Exactly, it's mutual. And it's often recursive, this process. Each new perspective doesn't just add information, it can shift the whole way you see, opening up more possibilities for change, like a fractal.
So Anna, after her detour, did things change beyond that one walk?
Well, the story goes that she started noticing more afterwards, even on her regular route. The texture of bark on a familiar tree, The specific calls of different birds, the way frost formed on railings, small things.
She went from passively moving through the space to actively participating and perceiving it.
Precisely. It wasn't just an alteration in her route, it was a shift in the underlying principles of how she organized her perception. A genuine change.
Which really underscores why, scrolling through Instagram travel feeds isn't quite the same thing.
Not at all. There's value there, inspiration maybe, but it lacks the embodied dimension, the feeling of the sun, the unexpected sounds, the effort of navigating. That physical engagement is crucial for that deeper shift.
Right. The brain responds differently when the whole body is involved.
It does. And back to the lake after the ripples fade, the water settles again, but it's not quite the same lake. It's integrated that disturbance. Stability and change, they aren't opposites fighting, they're a dynamic interplay, like yin and yang.
Okay, so that sets the stage, this need for disruption, how it messes with our perception in useful ways. Let's get deeper into the mechanics. You mentioned Kurt Lewin's field theory. How does that fit with travel?
Lewin's idea was that our behavior is a function of the total psychological field, the life space we're in at any moment. It's all about relationships, context.
So travel literally puts us in a whole new field.
A whole new field of possibilities, yes. And these fields have different psychological atmospheres. Think about the difference between being in a loud, chaotic marketplace versus a silent, ancient forest. Each space pulls different things from us, shapes our internal state.
And these new fields, they often demand more from us mentally, don't they? That idea of desirable difficulty.
Exactly. Our brains are suddenly working harder, increased cognitive load, trying to make sense of unfamiliar patterns, languages, social cues. But that strain is what promotes deeper learning and adaptation. New neural connections are forged.
And you mentioned isomorphism, this idea that our mental processes somehow mirror the structure of our environment.
It's a fascinating concept, the idea that there's a structural correspondence. So as we inhabit these different physical or cultural spaces, our consciousness itself might subtly reshape to align with them.
Wow. Okay, so going back to figure ground,
Yeah.
how does travel specifically mess with that automatic sorting process?
Well, our usual filters, honed by routine, just don't work as well. Something that was just background at home. Maybe the sound of church bells might become the absolute figure in a European city square, demanding your attention.
I can picture that. Or like a musician visiting Vienna, suddenly really seeing the buildings because of the history they hold.
Precisely. The context changes what stands out. And different cultures might even prioritize figure and ground differently. Think about traditional East Asian art and its conscious use of negative space, the emptiness.
Right, the ground is just as important as the figure.
Experiencing that can actually shift our own perceptual habits, make us aware of the space around things in our own lives.
Then there's the Gestalt idea of closure, wanting things to be complete, neat.
Our drive for pregnance again, yes. We want to make sense, fill in the gaps, finish the picture.
Which maybe explains the checklist approach to tourism.
Mm.
Got to see the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, tick, 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 complete the set.
It can manifest that way. But the real transformative potential often lies in resisting that urge for easy closure, in embracing the ambiguity, the open-endedness. Fritz Perls called this the fertile void.
The fertile void, I like that. It's in that space of not knowing, maybe getting lost, plans falling apart.
Yes. When communication breaks down, when things don't go as expected, that's often where creativity sparks. You have to improvise, find new ways to connect, new solutions. You step outside your usual patterns of coping.
And all this must impact how we use our attention, right?
Yeah.
Mixing up the automatic bottom-up stuff with the deliberate top-down focus.
Absolutely. Familiar places allow for a lot of autopilot attention. New places demand conscious, active focus. You're engaging different neural networks, forcing them to work together in novel ways.
And this actually changes the brain, physically.
The evidence points that way. Brain plasticity. Novelty and learning stimulate dendritic growth, new synaptic connections, particularly in areas like the hippocampus, which is vital for memory and spatial navigation.
So it's not just about having the experience, but how mindfully we engage with it.
That seems crucial. The more immersed you are, the more you practice what Gestalt calls creative adjustment, finding flexible ways to meet the environment, the deeper the transformation.
And this links to insight, those aha moments?
Very much so. Gestalt theory sees insight as a sudden restructuring of the perceptual field. Seeing the pieces fall into place in a new way, stepping away from routine like travel allows, often facilitates this restructuring.
That explains why people often say they get their best ideas on vacation or just after. The novelty, the different rhythm, less pressure.
It creates the conditions for it. And interestingly, the insight might be about something completely unrelated to the travel itself.
Because the way you're perceiving has shifted.
Exactly. The perceptual reorganization can ripple outwards. So, if we were to quickly summarize these mechanisms, travel works by disrupting patterns,
Breaking habits.
redistributing attention,
Waking up sleepy brain networks.
expanding our field of experience,
Holding multiple perspectives.
allowing contextual reframing,
Seeing ourselves differently.
and incubating insight.
Creating space for those aha moments. And these all feed into each other, I imagine.
They absolutely do. It's a dynamic system. Which brings up another point, the balance between planning and surrendering. You touched on this before.
Yeah, how much structure versus just going with the flow?
In Gestalt terms, this relates to contact, how we meet the world. Healthy contact involves both reaching out, shaping, engaging and yielding, allowing, receiving. Too much control, you miss the spontaneity. Too little, you might feel overwhelmed.
Finding that sweet spot lets you be present without drowning in the newness.
Precisely. And then all these moments, these feelings, these sights and sounds, they don't just stay as separate fragments. Our minds work to integrate them, following those Gestalt principles of organization, seeking wholeness, like notes forming a melody.
So it's not just collecting experiences, it's the active process of weaving them together afterwards, finding the meaning in them.
That active synthesis is where the lasting change really takes root, I believe.
This is fascinating. But you mentioned something earlier that really stuck with me, this paradox, that the biggest changes often hit us after we get back home.
Yes, it seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? You'd think the transformation happens out there,
Right.
but often it's the return that crystallizes things. Imagine looking in a slightly dusty mirror your whole life. Then you go away and see your reflection in a perfectly clear one when you come back to the dusty mirror.
You suddenly see the dust. The familiar looks different because you've experienced the contrast.
Exactly, that contrast enhancement. Your home environment hasn't changed, but your perception of it has been sharpened, sensitized by the difference you experienced.
And you mentioned Heimweh, that German word for homesickness, but it's deeper than just missing a place, isn't it?
It connects our sense of place to our sense of self. Returning home isn't just geographical, it's an act of reintegration, trying to fit your changed, evolved self back into the old context. Sometimes it fits, sometimes it requires adjusting the context or yourself further.
So travel cultivates a kind of internal mobility, the ability to navigate our inner landscape better, even when we're physically still.
That's a lovely way to put it. The experiences map new territories within us, give us new perspectives to draw on.
Which could, perhaps, explain why very seasoned travelers sometimes report diminishing returns.
That's a really astute point. Maybe after a certain point, the crucial factor isn't necessarily a new destination, but the state of openness that early travel cultivated.
Once you've learned to see with those travelers' eyes, maybe you can apply that anywhere. The external trigger becomes less vital.
It's possible. The transformation becomes more about maintaining that internal state of receptivity, that willingness to have your perceptions challenged. It reminds me of trying to synthesize Heraclitus all as flux, with Parmenides being as constant. Gestalt focuses on the present moment, the here and now, as the place where being and becoming meet.
And travel really amplifies that present moment awareness, doesn't it? You have to pay attention.
You do. And that heightened awareness, that richness of the present, that Bergson called pure duration, can actually persist for a while after returning, making ordinary moments feel more vibrant.
You also used a really interesting analogy, Gödel's incompleteness theorem. How does that relate?
Well, Gödel showed that any formal system, like mathematics, has inherent limitations. There are truths within the system that can't be proven using the system's own rules. You need a perspective from outside the system.
Okay.
Travel can offer that kind of outside perspective on our own lives, our own assumptions, our personal system. It allows us to see limitations or possibilities that were invisible from within our usual framework.
But even those wider perspectives aren't the final answer, right?
Absolutely not. Gödel applies there too. Even the expanded view is still a view, incomplete in its own way. Each journey might solve some riddles, but often reveals new questions, deeper layers. Transformation is a direction, not really a destination.
I like the architecture metaphor you used too. Travel puts stress on our psychological structures, but like well-designed buildings, that stress can ultimately make them stronger, more flexible.
Yes, the integration of those stresses, those challenges, is where the real strengthening happens. It connects to another Gestalt idea, unfinished business. Healthy psychological functioning isn't about resolving everything perfectly
It's about learning to live with some ambiguity, some incompleteness.
and allowing experiences, like those from travel, to keep resonating, generating new meanings over time. They remain active within us.
It sounds like James Carson's idea of finite versus infinite games. Trying to win personal growth is a finite game.
Whereas seeing it as an infinite game, the goal is just to keep playing, keep exploring, keep the process alive. Travel can be a powerful way to learn how to play that infinite game, to stay internally in motion, even when still.
That's a really profound takeaway, and you ended on this thought about ripples, how our individual journeys might affect the collective consciousness.
It's an open question, really, but it pushes us to think about interconnectedness. Are our personal transformations purely personal, or do they subtly shift the larger field we're all part of? Are our travels threads woven into a much bigger tapestry of becoming?
Food for thought, definitely. So you see, the learner, this whole exploration, this deep dive, it suggests transformation isn't just about seeing new places. Fundamentally, it's about learning to see in new ways.
Exactly. By shaking up those familiar patterns, engaging with difference, we can unlock a much deeper understanding of ourselves and the world we inhabit.
Think about Anna's detour. Even small deviations can shift your whole perspective, bring surprising things into focus. How could you, maybe intentionally, throw a few stones into your own still lake?
What small changes could invite new ripples, new discoveries, even in the everyday?
We hope this discussion has sparked some insights, maybe a few aha moments, and definitely some curiosity about this amazing interplay between perception, experience, and how we evolve as people.
What new grounds might you choose to explore next, physically or mentally? And what unexpected figures might just emerge for you as a result?
That's something to ponder long after this deep dive concludes.